Picture a desk, right? It's just covered in financial charts. You've got someone hunched over it.
Yeah, tapping away at a calculator, maybe holding a magnifying glass right up to these sprawling spreadsheets.
Exactly. They are looking for fraud. They're hunting for that one single number that breaks the pattern, the hidden lie, buried in the sea of perfectly balanced columns.
Right, the classic forensic accountant setup.
Yeah. Now take that image, that cold, calculating, deeply analytical hunt for financial deception, and drop it right into the middle of a school's pastoral care office.
It is such a jarring visual, isn't it?
Ah, totally, Jar. Welcome to today's deep dive, by the way, because today we are exploring a really fascinating stack of research that makes a wild connection between these two completely different worlds. We're looking at a framework titled What a DSL Can Learn from a Forensic Accountant. And our mission is to figure out, exactly how this mindset translates.
It's a huge leap. I mean, on one side, you have the world of corporate finance, ledgers, forensic audits, and on the other, you have the incredibly sensitive, human-centered work of a designated safeguarding lead, a DSL.
Right, the people whose entire professional existence revolves around protecting students.
Exactly. Protecting the emotional and physical well-being of kids. They deal with disclosures, they manage incident reports, they navigate trauma. It's highly emotional work.
It feels completely disconnected. But the premise here is actually brilliant when you start to break it down, because if you look at those visuals we just talked about, the spreadsheets, the meticulous analysis, the forensic accountant is operating under a very specific assumption.
And that assumption is that at first glance, everything usually looks totally normal.
Right, the numbers balance perfectly, the reports are complete, nothing jumps out as a crisis. Because, well, the fraudster isn't going to leave a giant waving red flag in the middle of page 3.
No, of course not. A true forensic accountant isn't looking for what is obvious. They're looking for what isn't there.
Ah, right.
They're looking at a perfectly balanced ledger and asking, why does this feel entirely too neat? What should logically be here, but is somehow missing?
Wow.
And that is the exact cognitive leap this framework asks safeguarding professionals to make. Because in safeguarding, it is just human nature to focus on the tangible things right in front of us.
The loud stuff.
Yeah, the disclosures that are actively made, the incident reports that land on the desk, the visible crises.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this brings us to the danger of normal. And honestly, this completely flips how most of us think about risk.
It really does.
This source points out that fraud doesn't usually appear as chaos. It hides in consistency. It hides in routine.
Right, it thrives in a pattern where everything looks like absolutely nothing unusual is happening.
Exactly. And the translation for a DSL is that safeguarding risk can exist exactly where no concerns are raised, where everything appears beautifully stable, and where a student is totally, not on the radar at all.
It's a massive strategic reframe. It demands that you internalize a very uncomfortable truth. And that truth is, no concerns does not equal no risk.
That is such a heavy sentence. No concerns does not equal no risk.
Right. Some of the most dangerous safeguarding blind spots exist in the very areas that feel the most normal. If the department hasn't logged a single concern in 6 months, your instinct shouldn't be to celebrate their flawless record.
Which is what everyone does, right? Hey, great job, no problems.
Exactly. But your instinct should actually be to investigate their silence.
But I really have to push back on this because, practically speaking, it feels incredibly counterintuitive and almost unmanageable.
How so?
Well, usually if my car isn't making a weird grinding noise, I assume the engine is perfectly fine. I don't take it to the mechanic and say, hey, it's running far too smoothly, something must be horribly wrong.
Right.
And realistically, a DSL is already drowning in paperwork. They are managing actual burning crises. So if you're telling them to go hunt for problems that aren't even on paper yet, aren't you just asking for massive institutional burnout?
It's a completely fair pushback.
Huh.
The car engine analogy highlights exactly why human systems are so tricky.
Because it's a machine.
Exactly. A car engine is mechanical. It doesn't actively hide its flaws out of fear or shame or peer pressure. A student might. But more importantly, let's look at the burnout angle.
Okay.
The framework argues that hunting for these gaps actually prevents the catastrophic burnout that comes from missing a massive issue until it explodes.
Oh, I see. So it's preventative.
Yeah. Forensic accountants specifically hunt for missing entries or incomplete records because they know those gaps are the architecture of a larger failure. In a school, those gaps look like inconsistent recording.
Or like a student who suddenly drops off the extracurricular roster with no explanation.
Precisely. or a total lack of follow-up on a minor behavioral note. What's fascinating here is that the flawless record isn't proof of a flawless student. It is often proof of a flawed recording system.
That makes so much sense. So you're saying the silence itself is the data.
Yes,
Huh.
it tells you a story about your organization's culture. Maybe there is a systemic lack of confidence in the reporting process.
Like maybe staff feel like filling out the forms is a waste of time because nothing ever happens anyway.
Right, exactly. Imagine a student who never appears in the pastoral logs over 3 entire years. Or consider a school culture where concerns are heavily discussed verbally in the staff room over coffee, but nobody ever actually writes them down in the official record.
Wow. Yeah.
The system looks perfectly clean on paper, but reality is a mess.
And statistical probability alone tells you that in an organization of 1,000 kids and hundreds of staff, something is happening. A perfectly clean slate is actually a statistical impossibility.
It really is.
Which makes it a glaring red flag. But if a clean slate is actually a red flag, then waiting for a massive gaping hole in the records is a losing game. We need to know what those massive gaps look like before they fully form, when they are just, tiny hairline cracks.
Which is exactly how forensic accountants operate. I mean, major financial crimes almost never start with millions of dollars vanishing overnight.
Right. It's not like the movies.
No, they start as incredibly small inconsistencies. A date that doesn't quite match up. A receipt for a slightly unusual amount. Very minor irregularities.
And so in the safeguarding world, what does that look like?
Well, these are the slight discrepancies in how a student recounts what they did over the weekend. It's a small, unexplained delay in a staff member filing a standard report. It's a very minor, almost imperceptible variation in a student's baseline behavior in a morning class.
It reminds me of a single dead pixel on a computer monitor.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, if you've ever had one, it's incredibly easy to ignore at first. You can still read your emails, you can still watch videos. It's just a tiny, localized black dot.
Right.
But if you know anything about how hardware degrades, that dead pixel isn't just a quirk. It is an early warning sign that the monitor's internal matrix is physically failing.
Yes, exactly. And in safeguarding, these dead pixels aren't the whole picture being broken. A slightly withdrawn student isn't a crisis on its own.
No, of course not.
But it's an early warning sign that the hardware of that student's well-being might be under stress.
It's the first clue.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. But here's the catch. To spot that single dead pixel, you have to be looking closely. And more importantly, you have to be looking across the entire screen.
Oh, meaning you can't just look at one area.
Right. A forensic accountant never looks at just one single data set. They don't analyze a company's expense reports in a vacuum without cross-referencing them against the revenue streams and the vendor invoices. They compare. They build a composite picture.
And the direct translation for a large organization or a school is breaking down the internal silos. Because, schools are notorious for this, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You have the academic teaching staff in one lane, the boarding or extracurricular staff in another. The medical team is in their own clinic, and the pastoral leads are in the main office. They're practically operating in different universes with different languages.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this silo effect is exactly where safeguarding so often breaks down in large organizations.
Tell me how that plays out.
Well, think about how it happens in reality. The math teacher notices a student is unusually tired and just assumes they are up late playing video games. That's one dead pixel.
Right.
Later that week, the medical team treats that same student for a minor, unexplained scrape, but they just log it as a playground trip. That's a second dead pixel.
And then maybe the boarding staff notices the student has quietly stopped eating dinner with their usual friend group. That's a third.
Exactly. And isolated, none of those things trigger an alarm.
Right. They don't meet the threshold for a major intervention.
No. To the math teacher, it's just a tired kid. To the nurse, it's just a scraped knee. Risk only becomes visible. The pattern only emerges when those isolated pieces of information are layered on top of each other.
The composite picture.
Yes, the forensic mindset requires you to stitch those dead pixels together until you realize a whole section of the screen is actually failing.
But this gets to something that constantly frustrates me when reading about systemic failures. If that data already exists, if the teaching staff knows something and the medical team knows something else and it's all floating around the building, why is it still so frequently missed?
It's a great question.
Because it's easy to blame a lack of software, but often they all use the same internal system anyway. The reason we miss it isn't a lack of data. it comes down to human psychology.
It really does. It comes down to the deeply ingrained, everyday assumptions we make to get through the workday. Assuming everything is correct, or assuming someone else has the full picture. That is the absolute quickest way to paralyze an investigation and allow a hidden issue to quietly metastasize.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the research points out the specific assumptions that create these blind spots. And they aren't malicious.
No, not at all.
They are incredibly mundane. It's phrases we have all used in every workplace on Earth. Someone else will definitely report it,
Right.
or it's probably nothing, I don't want to make a big deal out of it, or just, they seem fine to me.
They are the ultimate thought-terminating cliches. They sound perfectly reasonable in the moment, especially when you're busy, but they effectively shut down all professional curiosity.
Yeah.
Let's look at the psychology of organizational fatigue here. Imagine a teacher at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. They notice that slight shift in a student's behavior,
Yeah.
but they know that logging it into the official safeguarding software requires filling out 15 different fields, categorized by incident type with a mandated follow-up protocol.
Right. The bureaucracy of it creates a massive chilling effect.
Exactly. The teacher subconsciously downplays the anomaly because they don't want to trigger a massive bureaucratic avalanche for something that, is probably nothing.
So they assume someone else will handle it.
Yes, this is the bystander effect applied to data entry.
Mm.
And in safeguarding, these specific assumptions are identified as the absolute biggest threat to the system's effectiveness.
Wow.
Because when a system prioritizes compliance over curiosity, it starts relying on the illusion of a perfect report. And a perfect report is incredibly dangerous.
Let's expand on that, because the phrase perfect report sounds like a good thing. But the danger is that a perfect report is just a report that neatly checks all the compliance boxes, satisfies the software parameters, and resolves the issue cleanly on paper.
Right, it looks great to an external auditor.
Exactly. But human lives, especially the lives of vulnerable kids, are almost never neat, and they rarely resolve cleanly.
No, they don't. A system that looks perfectly complete but completely misses reality is the ultimate trap. Think about our hypothetical student with a perfectly clean file we mentioned earlier. That file looks perfect. But it's only perfect because the adults in the room were too intimidated by the reporting system to log the messy, nuanced, highly subjective behavioral changes they were actually seeing.
It's just a facade.
It is.
Yeah.
Safeguarding systems must reflect real concerns. They have to capture the messy, accurate, and often contradictory reality of a human being's life. They shouldn't just be a pristine paper trail designed to survive an audit.
So treating human well-being like a strict compliance exercise actually creates the blind spots we are trying to avoid.
Exactly.
Which means leadership has to completely change how they view this data. You can't just passively receive reports and file them away. You have to actively interrogate the system. You have to check the reality of the hallways against the paperwork in the office.
You have to cultivate a culture where auditing the records for inconsistency isn't seen as a punishment. It has to be the baseline norm. You have to encourage staff to submit imperfect reports, the hunches, the weird interactions, the dead pixels, without fear of doing the paperwork wrong.
I genuinely love the brilliance of this. Treating safeguarding records with the absolute rigor of a financial audit, looking for the missing data, cross-referencing across departments, hunting for the gaps, questioning the perfect reports.
It's incredibly effective.
It is a razor-sharp methodology, but I keep bumping up against a fundamental, unavoidable limitation here.
What's that?
A child is not a spreadsheet. A complex emotional crisis is not a hidden bank account. You cannot simply treat human well-being like a math problem where everything eventually balances out to zero.
And you absolutely shouldn't. And what's crucial is that the framework explicitly agrees with you.
Oh, it does.
Yes.
Yes.
It draws a very hard line on where this methodology steeps. Because as powerful as the forensic accountant analogy is, we cannot forget that forensic accounting is fundamentally retrospective.
Meaning looking backward.
Right. You are looking backward at money that has already been spent, moved, or hidden. It's autopsy work. Safeguarding, on the other hand, is active, breathing, and oriented toward the present and the future.
Let's break down those critical differences, because I think this is where the real nuance of the whole deep dive lives.
Okay.
Forensic accounting relies on objective data sets. A dollar is a dollar. A timestamp is a timestamp. If $10,000 is missing from the ledger, that is an objective, undeniable fact. But a DSL's reality is almost entirely subjective.
Exactly. Safeguarding relies on behavioral and contextual evidence, which is infinitely more complex than a bank statement.
Oh, for sure.
If a student is quiet in class, is that a sign of trauma at home, or do they just stay up late studying? It requires interpretation. It deals with subjective human experience, emotional volatility, and cultural context.
You can't put that in a neat little column.
No, not all concerns can be neatly quantified into a searchable dataset.
Which brings us right back to the human element. If you can't rely entirely on objective data, and if the software can't do the thinking for you, then human judgment is literally the only thing keeping the safety net intact.
Yes. And the proposed solution for this is building what the research calls a curious safeguarding culture.
A curious safeguarding culture. I like that.
It's essential
Yeah.
because you can't just buy a new software package or issue a memo to make your staff more aware. You have to build developmental pathways. This is about well-being literacy.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It means you have to actively train your math teachers, your boarding staff, and your medical teams to actually recognize those subtle indicators. You have to give them the vocabulary to articulate what a dead pixel looks like in their specific environment.
And it requires a leadership team that ensures the system maintains its integrity without becoming a bureaucratic nightmare. It's about regular auditing, continuous improvement, and making sure the rationale behind decisions is transparent to the staff. It's about ensuring people are relentlessly curious rather than safely complacent.
This raises an important question, and it's really the core system-level challenge this framework leaves leaders to wrestle with.
What's the question?
Look at your own organization. Where in your system is there absolutely no data? And what is that profound silence actually telling you about your culture?
So what does this all mean? If we take all of this, the magnifying glasses, the spreadsheets, the missing logs, the siloed departments, and the incredibly messy reality of human behavior, what is the ultimate takeaway for you listening to this right now?
Yeah.
Because even if you are not a designated safeguarding lead, and even if you haven't set foot in a school in 20 years, this dynamic applies to you.
The core lesson applies to literally any system you manage, any team you lead, or any complex organization you navigate. The ultimate lesson from the forensic accountant is that true oversight requires a refusal to accept the surface-level narrative. It requires curiosity. It requires a relentless, almost irritating attention to detail. Don't just celebrate the perfect reports your team hands you.
Because they might be too perfect.
Exactly. Have the courage to question what feels entirely too neat and actively look for the details that have been left off the page.
Because the forensic accountant doesn't just read what is there. They notice what isn't. They question what seems perfectly normal, and they follow the tiny, mundane trails that everyone else steps right over. But it leaves us with a really fascinating, almost unsettling tension to think about as we wrap up.
It really does.
We started with this image of someone meticulously hunting for financial discrepancies in a perfectly balanced spreadsheet. And we've seen how adopting that exact mindset can literally save lives by exposing the hidden gaps in a human system. But it begs a much larger question about how we design our institutions today. If a flawless, perfectly compliant system is actually a massive forensic red flag, at what point does our modern obsession with creating perfectly clean, frictionless data trails actually make the vulnerable people we are trying to protect less safe?